The shrill ring of a phone shattered the early morning quiet, jolting DEA agent Marcus Rivera awake. 8 years of restless sleep, 8 years of dreading that call, had trained his body to react instantly. This wasn't just any morning. It was the morning everything changed. The voice on the other end belonged to his supervisor, Director Patricia Thornton, and her tone was grave. "Marcus, I need you to sit down. We've had a development in Elena's case." Those words hit him like a sledgehammer. Elena, his sister, his fellow D agent, gone vanished without a trace 8 long years ago, while investigating suspected cross-border trafficking near the Canadian border in Washington state. Just like that, hope and terror swirled in his gut. Hope, because finally, there might be news. Terror, because after so long, what kind of news could it possibly be? The drive north from Seattle was a blur of towering evergreens and winding mountain roads, each mile carrying him closer to a mystery that had consumed him for almost a decade. The last time anyone heard from Agent Elena Rivera and her partner, Agent Sarah Collins, was during a routine surveillance operation. They were good agents, dedicated, following leads along suspected smuggling corridors. Then, radio silence. Days passed. Then weeks. The investigation officially classified them as missing, presumed dead, but Marcus never stopped searching, never stopped wondering. What happened out there in the dense forest? Did they stumble onto something too big? Something that someone was willing to kill to protect? The questions gnawed at him, leaving behind only guilt and an unshakable need to know the truth. The gravel road leading to the scene was brand new, carved out by a mining company conducting routine surveys. Orange cones and official vehicles marked the entrance to a cave system. A cave that, according to a mining crew exploring its depths, held a secret buried for 8 years. A secret that would rewrite everything they thought they knew. Forensics? Teams buzzed around the cave entrance, their white coveralls stark against the earth. Marcus's heart hammered as he approached the lead investigator, Dr. Sarah Lindstrom. Her eyes held a mixture of professional detachment and genuine sympathy. "Agent Rivera, I was told to expect you. I want to prepare you for what we've found." Inside a nearby tent, the grim reality began to unfold. 3 body bags lay on examination tables. One victim, identified quickly through dental records and a still legible D badge, was Sarah Collins. She hadn't gotten lost. She hadn't had an accident. The preliminary x-rays showed clear signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. This wasn't a disappearance. This was murder. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. Sarah was gone, killed violently, her body hidden in a flooded cave chamber. But the horror wasn't finished. Dr. Lindstrom's next words hit him like a physical blow. "We've thoroughly searched the vehicle and immediate cave area. Agent Elena Rivera's body is not among those we've recovered." Relief warred with an even deeper dread. If Elena wasn't in the cave with Sarah, with their vehicle, where was she? Had she been taken? Had she escaped only to meet a different, lonelier end somewhere else in the vast wilderness? The questions multiplied, and then came the kicker, the detail that made his blood run cold. Despite being supposedly submerged for 8 years, the recovered truck, Elena's white Ford F-150, showed surprisingly minimal rust or water damage. Dr. Lindstrom's preliminary assessment suggested it had only been in the cave for 6 months, maybe less. Someone had placed it there recently, deliberately. Someone had been covering their tracks, hiding the truth, maybe even hoping the whole thing would be forgotten. Someone who might still be out there, watching, waiting, knowing that this discovery could unravel everything they'd built on a foundation of lies and blood. Standing at the edge of that cave opening, looking down at the partially submerged truck, through the powerful spotlights, Marcus couldn't shake the image. Had Elena looked up through that same opening? Was she trapped down there somewhere, in the darker, unexplored reaches? Or was her story, her fight, her nightmare, something far worse than simply dying in a crash? Sarah's murder proved one undeniable fact. They had been targeted. Their killer had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide the evidence. And now, with the truck found and the truth beginning to surface, someone might be very, very worried. As Marcus stared into the dark mouth of the cave, he realized this wasn't just about finding his sister anymore. This was about finding the monster who took her, who killed her partner, and who had been hiding in plain sight for 8 agonizing years. The discovery in the cave was just the beginning. The real hunt, the dangerous one, was about to begin. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Sheriff Wade Thompson emerged from the cave's shadow. His patrol car, a stark island of blue and white light amidst the ancient trees. Marcus watched from his concealed position, every instinct honed by years of detraining screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. Thompson wasn't supposed to be here, not now, not when the forensics team was still processing the scene, just 50 yards away. The sheriff moved with purpose, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached his vehicle. But Marcus noticed the subtle tremor in his hands, the way his eyes kept darting back toward the cave entrance. This wasn't the confident lawman who had shown up at the motel room just hours earlier, with a story about confidential informants and secret meetings. Marcus had spent the drive from the Cascade Ridge Motel running scenarios through his mind, each one more disturbing than the last. Why would Thompson lie about having an informant? Why did he know the forensics timeline so intimately? Most importantly, why had his relief been so palpable when Marcus confirmed that Elena's body wasn't among the recovered remains? These weren't the actions of an uninvolved local sheriff trying to help solve a federal case. These were the actions of someone who had been holding their breath for 8 years, waiting to see if the bodies they'd buried would ever be found. The encrypted drive in Marcus's pocket felt heavier now, containing the financial records he'd pulled from the DEA archives, Thompson's unexplained wealth, the property purchases, the frequent trips to Vancouver that never showed up in official travel logs. The radio chatter from the command post crackled through Thompson's open car window, voices discussing search grid expansions and ground-penetrating radar requests. Marcus saw the sheriff's jaw tighten, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel in a nervous rhythm that spoke volumes about his internal state. Through his binoculars, Marcus watched Thompson pull out his personal phone, stepping away from his vehicle to make a call that was definitely not part of any official protocol. The conversation was brief but intense, Thompson's voice rising in agitation before he slammed the phone against his patrol car's hood in a display of rage that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Whatever news he'd received, it had shattered whatever carefully constructed facade he'd been maintaining. As Thompson threw his duffel bag into the back seat and started his engine, Marcus made a split-second decision that went against every rule in the D handbook. He couldn't go through official channels, not yet. If Thompson was dirty and the evidence was mounting rapidly, then alerting the system would only give him time to disappear, to destroy evidence, to ensure that Elena's sacrifice meant nothing. Marcus had spent 8 years chasing ghosts and dead ends, and now that he was finally closing in on the truth, he couldn't let it slip away again. He started his own vehicle, maintaining enough distance to keep Thompson's dust cloud visible without revealing his pursuit. The Forest Service roads winding deeper into the wilderness like arteries leading to the heart of darkness. The terrain became increasingly familiar as they climbed higher into the mountains. Thompson, following old smuggling trails that Marcus had studied countless times in the case files from 8 years ago. It was then that Marcus realized the horrifying truth. Thompson was heading toward the exact sectors he had marked as impassable during the original search. Areas that the corrupt sheriff had systematically excluded from investigation with plausible explanations that now rang hollow. The man who had been put in charge of helping find Elena had actually been the one steering search teams away from where she had likely died, where her body might still be hidden. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound, because it meant that for 8 years, Marcus had been working with the very monster who had taken his sister. The winding road led them to a clearing, dominated by the skeletal remains of the Bracken Ridge lumber mill, a place that should have been abandoned but showed clear signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks, new security cameras, the subtle hum of generators that spoke to operations requiring privacy and power. Marcus found concealment behind a massive fallen cedar, his heart hammering as he watched Thompson meet with 3 men, whose faces he recognized from intelligence briefings. Victor Koff, Chen Wei, Robert Tanner, names that had haunted federal investigations for years, always seeming to slip away just when the net was closing. The casual familiarity of their greeting, the thick envelope of cash that changed hands, the conversation fragments that drifted across the clearing like smoke. It all painted a picture of a well-oiled criminal enterprise that had been operating with impunity right under the noses of law enforcement. Increased federal presence since the cave discovery, Thompson was saying, his voice carrying an edge of panic that Marcus had never heard before. They'll expand the search grid within days. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They knew about the cave discovery already, which meant they had been monitoring the investigation from the inside. Elena's final act of hiding evidence in that flooded chamber hadn't just been an attempt to leave clues, it had been a desperate move to ensure that when the truth finally came to light, it would be undeniable. But now Thompson and his associates were planning to accelerate their timeline, to move their operation and destroy any remaining evidence before the expanded search could uncover it. The conversation fragments painted a nightmare scenario, references to a northern site that needed to be cleared up, just like Thompson had supposedly done 8 years ago. Discussion of trafficking victims being moved through established corridors, of product that needed to be relocated before federal scrutiny could expose the full scope of their operation. Marcus felt the weight of his service weapon against his ribs, knowing that he was outnumbered and outgunned, but also understanding that this might be his only chance to stop them. Before they vanished again into the shadows, the northern site Thompson mentioned, could that be where Elena had been held, where she had died, where evidence of their crimes was still buried, waiting to be discovered? As the meeting began to break up and the criminals moved toward their vehicles, Marcus made another critical decision. He couldn't let them scatter, couldn't allow this opportunity to slip away. He called David Chen, his voice tight with urgency as he outlined what he'd witnessed. providing GPS coordinates and descriptions of the suspects. The response was immediate but carried its own warning. Backup was coming, but it would take time, precious time that Thompson and his associates might use to destroy everything. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a physical burden. Alina had fought for 2 months in captivity, had hidden evidence that would eventually bring down this entire network, and now it was his turn to carry that fight forward, to ensure that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. The dashboard clock showed 4:47 p.m. as Marcus watched Thompson's patrol car peel out in a spray of gravel. The sheriff's driving becoming increasingly erratic as panic took hold. Whatever news he'd received on that phone call had clearly shattered his composure, revealing the carefully controlled facade for what it was, a desperate man, realizing that his carefully constructed lies were finally catching up with him. Marcus followed at a distance, his own driving, cautious but determined, knowing that Thompson was leading him toward answers that had been buried for 8 years. The forest grew darker as they climbed higher, shadows lengthening across the road, like grasping fingers, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into a trap even as he pursued the truth about his sister's fate. The encrypted drive in his pocket contained damning evidence, but evidence meant nothing if he ended up dead in a remote clearing. Another body for someone to stumble upon years from now. Yet, he pressed on, driven by the same fierce determination that had kept him searching for 8 years. Knowing that Elena's final message, hidden in that cave with Sarah's body, had been a beacon pointing toward this moment. This confrontation with the monster who had destroyed their lives. The coroner's van disappeared down the winding forest road, carrying Alina home at last. Marcus watched it go from the back of an ambulance, his arm bandaged, his head stitched, but his heart finally feeling something other than the constant, gnawing ache of loss and uncertainty. The rising sun painted the clearing where they'd found her in shades of gold, washing away some of the darkness that had lingered there for 8 years. Chen sat beside him, silent for a moment, letting the significance of the moment settle. She saved them, you know, Marcus said finally, his voice rough but steady, pulling Elena's bloodstained note from his pocket and holding it up. 32 people are alive right now because she never stopped fighting, even when, ... He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Chen nodded, having read the full confession himself. Alina Rivera, faced with unimaginable horror, had used her final moments of lucidity not for despair, but to gather evidence, to hide it, and to send a message. She had turned her suffering into a beacon that would eventually lead to this moment, to the dismantling of the network that took her. The drive to the hospital was quiet, broken only by the periodic checks of the medics monitoring his vitals. But Marcus's mind was racing ahead. Thompson was talking, chained to a hospital bed and facing a death sentence, but talking nonetheless. The scope of the operation was staggering. 2 other corrupted officials, a network of safe houses, routes that shifted with law enforcement, patterns. Alina had stumbled into something far bigger than anyone had imagined. And now, thanks to her hidden evidence and Thompson's desperate, belated cooperation, the pieces were finally fitting together. 5 additional burial sites were being excavated even now, based on locations Thompson provided under the terms of his plea negotiations. Families who had waited years for news, for anything, would finally have answers, bodies to bury. Some measure of closure, however painful. Days blurred into weeks. Marcus stayed in the hospital, just long enough for the doctors to be satisfied he wouldn't bleed out, then immediately threw himself into coordinating the follow-up investigations. Thompson's confession was a dam breaking. Federal prosecutors, Border Patrol, local law enforcement, everyone was scrambling to process the information, to arrest the named conspirators, to shut down the remaining safe houses. The ripple effects were enormous. It wasn't just Washington. In British Columbia, connections led to distribution networks further south, links to other trafficking corridors. Elena's single act of defiance had triggered an avalanche. The media caught wind. Inevitably, DEA agents' hidden evidence leads to massive human trafficking bust. Read one headline. Sister's sacrifice brings down corrupt sheriff, said another. Marcus gave a single, carefully worded interview, focusing on Elena's heroism and the teamwork of the agencies involved. He didn't want her story reduced to a sensational soundbite, but he also wanted the world to know what she had done. That she had mattered, that she had fought. Elena's funeral was a quiet affair, attended by fellow agents, family, and a few of the survivors who felt well enough to come. Marcus placed the note she'd written in her casket, folded carefully beside her badge. He spoke, briefly, not about how she died, but about how she lived with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to justice. He told them about the note, about her final act, ensuring others would be saved. It brought tears to the eyes of everyone who heard it, especially the families of the other victims whose remains were also being laid to rest. Months later, Marcus stood in the DEA office, looking out over Seattle. The case file on his desk was finally closed. Thompson, along with Victor Koff and several others, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trafficking network was dismantled. the survivors were receiving support. The 5 additional burial sites had yielded the remains of 23 more victims, giving names and faces to the statistics, bringing peace to grieving families. The corruption within local law enforcement had been purged. Thanks to Thompson's detailed confession, he picked up Elena's badge from the frame on his desk. Running a finger over the engraved number, the guilt would always be there. The what-if questions that haunted every family member left behind, but it was joined now by something else, a profound, aching pride. He thought of the teenage girl in the warehouse, the one he'd shielded with his own body, now safely back with her family in Oregon. He thought of the 31 others, rebuilding their lives. They were Elena's legacy as much as his memory was. Her fight, her sacrifice, had saved them all. The cave discovery had indeed proven everyone wrong about the initial disappearance. It wasn't an accident or a simple case of getting lost. It was a brutal murder, part of a vast conspiracy that reached deep, but it had also been the crack that let the light in, the beginning of the end for the monsters who thought they could hide forever. Marcus closed the file and turned away from the window. There were other cases, other agents who needed support, other monsters hiding in the shadows. Elena's work, their work, was never truly finished. But for now, for the first time in 8 years, he could breathe. He could remember his sister not just as a victim, but as the hero she was. And he could live with the knowledge that her final, desperate act of defiance had ensured that her death, her suffering, her life, had meaning far beyond what anyone could have imagined. She had vanished on duty, yes, but she had also, in her own way, come home.